Hey YouTube, this is Nick. I've got my new microphone and my tripod here. Going to attempt to make my first video, right? So first thing I'm going to be doing today is we're going to be putting a new floor in a bathroom. It's a floating floor by COREtec. This is actually a bathroom in a mobile home. So the first thing we have to do is turn off the water. Let me flip this around. That didn't work. How do you flip the camera around, you think? So you can see here that the old floor is a vinyl floor, and then there's actually a little step up here with this transition strip, which is not attached very well. So the new floor is going to end up being flush with this floor, and we will go get a new transition strip to put here. There's actually one in this room. It's a different color, so we're going to get one to try to match that so they are consistent with each other. This vent in the floor just comes right up very easily. So we will just pull that up, cut around it, and do that. We'll pull off all the trim here and all the way around the room, set that, and then we're actually going to put like a 1x4 for the trim here to cover it all. And we'll put a quarter round around here. We're not going to pull the vanity. Normally we'd pull a vanity, but in this situation it's kind of cocked in place with this weird stuff. So we're just going to go up to it. Also on the tub side, there's this rubber flashing which never went all the way to the end there. See how they left a piece out? So we are going to figure out something to do there. Might just be another piece of 1x4 across. Okay, next we're going to start pulling the trim off. Just use a flat bar. And here, this is very easy. So we'll pull these off, and then any little nails like this, we'll just use a little nail puller and pull those off. All right, so I've got my nail puller. Just gonna grab the nail, give it a little tug, little guy right there. That's it. There's another one right here. Ooh, it doesn't want to go. If they don't want to go, you just bang them in. This is like 1/8 inch drywall because this is a mobile home. So this is not, it's going to break easily. So if you can't pull them, do that. All right, so we got all the trim off. I'm just gonna pull this thing out. Usually they're screwed down. This doesn't have any screws, so that was probably the easiest thing we've done all day. It should just come right off, yeah. Easy. All right. So at this point, while we have access under here, we're just gonna make sure there's no water damage or anything that might need to be addressed before we close it up and can't get to it again. It all seems fine. And the last thing we've got to do is pull this threshold up. All right, so we got the floor ready to go. The next thing we're going to do is take our multi-tool, which is pretty standard tool to have nowadays. This didn't used to be a standard thing. When I was starting out, this tool wasn't really invented, and then they came out with one and it was like $500. Now you can get one with blades and everything for $200 or less probably. So we're gonna take the multi-tool and we're gonna cut along. See how this one's already cut up because there was a piece of trim here? That'll be fine because our new flooring is gonna run here, and then we're gonna put a 1x4 baseboard. So this is gonna get up higher, get cut up higher eventually. But for now, we just need to have enough, like here and here we're gonna have to cut it, just enough so that we can get the flooring in, and then after the flooring's in, we'll come back and we'll put baseboard on everything. All right, so the next thing we're gonna do is cut the door jambs for the flooring. So I got just a scrap of the flooring left. We actually have this flooring left from another bathroom we did in the house. And so we're gonna set this on the floor up against the door jamb. And we're gonna put the Sonic Crafter, multi-tool, whatever you wanna call it, on the flooring and then push it against the door jamb when it's on. And then it will cut the jamb just a little bit bigger than the flooring so we can fit the flooring right underneath. So we'll do that next. Oh, and also, so this flooring was picked, it has a cork base built into it, and it is made out of some sort of vinyl composite type material. So it's good for a bathroom because it's waterproof. You know, cork's pretty good against water, and vinyl's like waterproof. I put a piece of our flooring right there, hold it down tight, and just cut. We'll repeat the same thing on the other side, and then I think we're ready for flooring. All right, so the next thing to do is to lay out your flooring how you want to do it. These are huge pieces. They're a little over 18 by 24. Like I said earlier, they're leftovers from the other bathroom that we did. So we've got like a bunch of cutoffs and, you know, stuff like that. So we figured out a way to make it work using all full sheets, and there was a little cutoff to make that work. So that started where our seam's going to be, right there. And then we're going to carry the seam straight through over here, and then this sheet just gets centered basically on the seam. And then we've got a sheet here that will get bumped all the way in and notched around there, and a sheet here that's a full sheet. So we got two full sheets, and then we have another full sheet right there. So that full sheet will get cut for here, and the piece left over will get cut here. And then we have these three strips that were left over that will work right here. And we will have one full sheet left over. So when we're all done, if there's ever a problem in either bathroom and they need to destroy a sheet for whatever reason, they got more. All right, so I'm gonna quickly show you how this floating floor goes together. One side has like a big flap with a groove in it, and the other side has the opposite shape. So what you do is you just set them like that, and then you lift it up and it goes into that groove, and then when you set it back down, you wiggle it a little bit, they just fit right inside of each other like that. Can't even see that groove barely. You know what I mean? Look at that thing. And then if you ever need to take it apart, it just comes right apart. But you have to lift for it to come out. It won't just come out. All right, I'm back. Today I'm going to be installing the flooring. We got rained out yesterday, so we had a crazy storm. I couldn't work outside and cut all the pieces, so we're going to finish that up today. Yesterday we laid out all the pieces on the floor just to make sure we had enough, and now we're going to just get some lines and figure out exactly where they're all going to go and start cutting the pieces. So I'll show you how to do that. All right, so for laying it out, we had this piece, we had a couple pieces this width left over. So we're going to start with these on this edge of the floor to figure out our numbers. We're about 5 1/8. So anytime you've got a wall, you want to leave about 1/4 of an inch with a floating floor, because they will expand and contract. They're not attached at all, so you need to leave some space for that. So if they're 5 1/8, we're going to make it about 5 3/8 to the groove. And that'll give us that line, and we'll work off of that, and then we're actually going to install from the other direction and work our way this way, just because of the way that the tongue and groove are on the boards. But just so we end up where we want, we're going to figure it all out. All right, so to make our lives easy, let's snap a few pieces together. So they go together that easily, right? Snap one together. Now the reason I'm snapping these together is we just want to be able to know exactly the dimension that we're working with here. So we've got all the pieces snapped together. I've got my 1/4 inch approximate gap on this end. So I've got one full sheet here, one full sheet here. So on this end, where the toilet is, leaves me with about 17 1/4. Now if I take 1/4 inch off for the space we need to leave here, my first piece needs to be 17 inches. And based on the pattern we had already figured out, we're going to use this piece that we had left over to go against the cabinet. And then this piece is going to go against that. So you'll notice that it's too big right here. So we have to cut down one or the other. So I think just for simplicity's sake, we're going to keep this piece as big as we can. So we'll measure from here to here. And this piece is tight up against here. So we'll get this whole number, and then we're going to subtract 1/2 inch, which would be 1/4 inch for this space and 1/4 inch for this space. And that will give us our cut here. Because this is all going to get covered with 3/4 inch molding, this does not have to be exact. So we're going to go with the smaller number, 23 3/4. And if we take 1/2 inch off for the 1/4 inch on each side, that leaves us with 23 1/4. So on the sheet here, we're going to measure from not the full edge, because there's a lip here. So we want to just measure from the top surface, 23 1/4, and make a mark. So we're going to be taking off 1 inch off of this piece. And our rip on the other end to the wall, as we already measured, is going to be 17 1/4 minus the 1/4 inch space, so 17 inches. So we're going to measure that off of this edge. So we measure out 17 inches. 17 inches. This one was 23 1/4, so we'll measure that. Then we're going to take a straight edge, mark a line, and that's going to be where you're going to cut the piece. On this little piece, because that's going to hit the wall, we're going to cut that also at 17 inches off of, let me just show you this. So there's this lip. So we're not going to measure from here. We're going to measure from the top face, 17 inches back. All right, so there's my mark right there. And let's go cut it. All right, so I'm set up outside. I got my table saw set up and my jigsaw set up. We're gonna make the cuts. Safety first, got my hearing protection, my safety glasses on. For this first cut, we want to take off 1.5 inches. So we're going to set the blade to 1.5 inches. Now we want to be on the outside of the blade, not on the inside of the blade, because we want to cut and leave this piece. So once we're set to 1.5 inches, check it. You can see if you eyeball right down the blade that it's set to cut right on that side. And then we're going to use our guide to push it through so we don't get our fingers in there. Okay, so for this next cut, I'm actually going to use the jigsaw just because I don't want to put that little sliver through the table saw. All right. And then we've got that other little piece right here. We'll make a mark. Here's an easy way to make a mark. You can just hold your finger and run the pencil like that. Okay, let's go back inside. All right, so the next part can be a little more tricky. This is still set where it's going to end up. Let's just snap this in, make sure we like where it is. All right, so we've got a measure here, 1.25 inches to 8.25 inches. All right, we want 1/4 inch of space. So we're going to go from 1 inch to 8.5 inches. So this is already set up, oriented where it's going to go. We're going to do the same measurement right off. 1 inch to 8.5 inches. We're going to double check just to make sure. 1.25 inches, so with a space is 1 inch. 8.25 inches with a space is 8.5 inches. Double check. Got my 1 inch and my 8.5 inches. Oh. Can't see my mark right here. The other one was off. See, that's why we measure twice and cut once. So I've got my 2 marks there. Then we're going to do the same thing from the side. 7.5 to 14.5. So we're going to go 7.25, 14.75. As I measure, and it's 7.5, so I split that is 3.75 to the center. 3.75 to the center. So I've got my exact center now. Double check, make sure I'm still good. All right, so there's my center. And then I put my tape measure right on there, right on that point, and I measure off 3.75 on a few spots. If you've got like a circle, a compass, you can use one of those. I have one in the truck, but this works just as well. If this was had to be more accurate measurement, I would use that, but this is all going to get covered underneath the toilet, so it really doesn't have to be perfect. Now, I'm going to take into consideration here, we've got these 2 screw heads in the way, so I'm going to make a little extra room. I'm just going to draw out this circle here, roughly connect all my dots. La 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 la. All right, and then on those 2 sides here, I'm just going to add a little bit extra, like little ears, just to make sure I get out of the way of these. So for the water line, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to measure out 4 7/8 and in 11 3/4. So 4 7/8 11 3/4. So for this, what we'll do is we have a metal escutcheon that's going to cover the hole. So we're actually just going to drill a hole through this that this will fit through, and then the metal plate will cover over that. So we'll shoot big. Now, so we don't have to make this hole too big. You can easily just take this off. Just a Phillips head screw. Pop off that. And it makes this much smaller. So kind of measure, I need at least 1 1/4 inch hole. So I'll see if I have 1.5 inch spade bit, and we can just drill that with 1.5 inch spade bit, set this thing right on there, and we'll be ready to do the next piece. All right, so the biggest one I had was actually 1.25 inch. Set it right on our mark. All right, so for the toilet flange, we're just gonna use a smaller drill bit to make a pilot hole. And then we'll use the jigsaw to just make the hole. All right, so we've got our holes cut. Let's just make sure they're gonna fit in here. That water line right there. That worked. So yeah, looks like we're gonna fit. We'll be fine. Let's set this one first. Snap this one in. Remember, just stick it in the groove. Push down. Have to wiggle it a little bit. You want to make sure that they're lined up on the face, so that when the next one goes in, they just click right together. All right, so we want to stagger the joints in the middle. So the next thing we're going to do is figure out where the middle of this sheet is. So it's exactly 24. So right on 12 inches is where we want that seam to be. Right there. And so what I'll do here is I'm going to mark 1/4 inch in about. You know, I can eyeball it. You might want to use the tape measure just to make sure you're good. We want about 1/4 inch space there. And then we have to see how much we have to bring this sheet in. 3/4 inch to bring it in. But then we also, again, need that 1/4 inch of space. So we're going to bring this in 3/4 plus 1/4. So 1 inch. So we're going to come in 1 inch and make a mark. And you still see me here, right? Yeah, 1 inch. And make a mark. Now, that's going to be our cut. And again, we're just going to cut this with the jigsaw. This is all going to get covered with a 1/4 round. So it doesn't have to be a perfect cut. I mean, it does, but it doesn't have to be. All right, we've got this piece cut. Let's see how it fits in here. Like a glove. Boom. Just make sure we did this right. We should be right at 12. Yep. Okay. The next piece here, we've got 11 5/8. That's straight all the way through. So we'll take off the 1/4 inch. We need to cut one 11 3/8. So I got the next sheet here ready to go. I like to set them down the way that they're going to go oriented the right way. Remember, they got a lip and a groove. So they only go one direction. You cannot flip this the other way. They all have to run the same direction with each other. So this piece here measures 11 5/8. We're going to take off 1/4 inch for the gap on the end. Now we're going to pull that number off of here because we're going to use this end of the board, which is going to fit right here to continue that pattern. We need that. This has the lip on the bottom, so we need the groove piece that goes over that, which is on this end. So we're going to measure it out. 11 3/8, 11 3/8. Depending on how you want to cut this, you could put a line. You could use a jigsaw, a circular saw. If you've got a table miter saw, you can cut it from both directions in. I'm gonna cut it right on the table saw. So I'm just gonna set the saw to the number and cut it. All right, I've made the cut. Now we're just gonna orient it the right way. And we'll snap it in. And then, so when we have to go into two of them, you've got to kind of like lift up the other sheet and work that in and lay them both down. And they'll kind of go right together. And you kind of wiggle them and kind of force them in and they'll just find their home. We had already ripped this piece at 17.5. So we're gonna have to do the same thing here. 17.5 off of this edge, which has the same profile as this one. All right, then we need to measure to the wall. So we've got 16.25, and then we're going to subtract the 1/4 inch for the space. So we'll have 16 inches. We're going to measure that off of the opposite side because that's going to be the piece that slides into here. 16. All right, so on this side we're gonna measure, hold the tape measure off of the cabinet about 1/4 inch, and the door jamb here is at about 10 1/8. So we're gonna leave more than 1/4 inch here because we want to have plenty of space in here. Let's go 9 5/8. So to get that 9 5/8, we're gonna measure off of our line that we made, where we're going to cut it against the cabinet and measure out 9 5/8. All right, now the last number we need is, so the number to the flooring is 19 7/8. All right, and we're going to have a threshold here, so we don't need to be close. We're going to leave 1/2 inch of space there. So 19 7/8, we're going to do 19 3/8. Now we're going to connect all the dots. All right, so there's our piece. We're going to cut all this off. We're going to use the jigsaw to do all this. Okay, so I went to slide this in and I immediately noticed that the angry inch got me, as we call it. I measured 8 5/8 instead of 9 5/8. So I'm just going to mark that 9 5/8. Recut that, and then we'll get it in. All right, let's try this again. Slide that right in there. That looks like it's going to fit. Now, the lip on this one is on this side. So this actually needs to go underneath, but then I have to go under the door jamb too. So what we got to do is I'm gonna put this like that under there first and get it into place where I want it. And I'm gonna try to do this without messing the whole floor up, but all right. So we got it almost in, but there's a little gap. So I've got this pry bar. You set it on the floor. You have to have your weight on the other piece of flooring, and you can kind of tap it, a couple taps, boom, goes right in. That's done. In the process of working on that other side, these pieces came back apart because I was wiggling them, and so we're just going to do the same thing over here. Get these back in, right where they want to be, like that. And then like that. And we'll use the same bar over here. Give it a little love tap. All right, went right in, no problem. And then we've got a little gap here, so I've got a little scrap piece. We're going to put it on the edge and we'll knock it back into place. And using my pry bar on this end. All right. Everything's looking pretty tight here. All right, so once we've got this all snapped in the way we like it, we just want to make sure that it's a floating floor, so there's some movement here. You just want to make sure that you're centered. Got a 1/4 inch everywhere, approximately. Remember, we got 3/4 inch trim covering this, so you can have a little bit of space. You don't want to have more than a 1/2 inch. You want to be covering at least a 1/4 inch, so if this floor moves at all, it's always covered. All right, so a full sheet will work here, but our seam is here. So we need to do the same thing we did earlier. And we're going to take a piece and we're going to measure to make sure it's right in the middle. Now the sheets are 24, so we want to put that seam right on 12 inches. So it's going to go right there. So now that I'm good here, I'm just going to mark where the edges of this sheet are going to be. All right. And I'm going to make a line here because we have this vent we have to cut out. All right, so we've got it marked out where the sheet goes. Now the vent, there's a little bit of wiggle room, but not much. So it looks like if it was to be all the way over, it would be right on the edge of that sheet. So I'm going to hold it that direction. And right where I think I want the vent to go, I'm just going to mark that down too. Now I know exactly how much coverage I'm going to have. So it looks like the edge of this sheet here, I can basically just cut all the way out. It kind of works out perfectly that the line of the sheet is a 1/4 inch out from this hole. And remember, we need floating space. It's a floating floor, so we need to have some space anyway. So I'm just going to cut that straight out. Now on this edge here, I've got a mark where we marked it, so I'm going to come in 4.5 inches. This actually has about an inch, maybe 3/4 of an inch. It's an inch on the ends and 3/4 of an inch on the sides. So there's some wiggle room here to work with. So if I shoot for 1/2 inch in from my line, it'll give us room. So I'm going to measure there 5 inches in from the edge. Right there. And then for the other side, it's 16 inches, and I'm going to come in to 15 3/8. Looks like it'll just make it. 15 3/8. And from my pencil line to the line is about 5 1/8. So if I come in 1/2 inch from there, we're going to go a little more than 1/2 inch. We're going to go to 4.5 inches in. And right there. So we've got our measurements on here. Use the speed square. Make our marks. Right like that. All right, let's go cut that piece. I'm gonna go cut that with a jigsaw and I'll be right back. All right, so I got this cut here. And it looks like it's gonna fit perfectly. So let me just make sure I'm good with my 12 inches, right about there. And we'll lift that and lay it right down. Snapped right in. That's it. Make sure the vent fits. We're good to go. Now we're going to cut the next piece, and we've got the cutoff from the end by the shower. Works out to be here. So it's one thing to remember anytime you're doing any flooring, the cutoff from one end oftentimes will work. Call it the starter and the finisher. That will often work for the opposite ends. So we're going to do the same thing we did before. We're just going to measure what we need and add a 1/2 inch gap. So it's 7 7/8. It's about 7 7/8. So we're just going to go with 7 3/8 off of. Now again, we've got this lip here that's got to go into the groove here. So you got to make sure these are always double check, make sure oriented the same way. So we're going to do the 7 3/8, measure off of here. All right, got this piece ready to go in. Make sure your grooves are all clear. Gonna snap that in there. All right, I'm gonna use my floor pry bar and do the same thing I did before to get that last edge in. Just gonna give it a couple taps. Boom, right in, no problem. Okay, we got our last full piece to go in. Just like before, we're gonna measure out 23 3/4, minus 1/4 of an inch for space, so 23 1/2. Again, flip your tape around, measure from the other end. 23 1/2. Now, we're gonna have a notch here. So we're gonna measure to the wall. It's 20 3/4. So again, take that 1/4 inch off. It'll be 20 1/2. 17 7/8. So that'll be 17 5/8. All right. So we're going to cut this little corner off. And then we're going to rip that whole edge. All right, so I got the sheet cut. Let's just set it right in here, see if it's going to go. Looks like it'll go. So now, again, we've got this problem of we want to get into both these grooves, but we're under the wall on this trim on both sides. If the trim wasn't on here, we'd be able to lift this thing up and pop it in and whatever. But we don't have that luxury, so right now we have to use the bar again. We're going to tap it into place. All right, here we go. So again, the floor is floating, so every time we whack it like that, the whole thing moves. So it's very easy to just take your weight off it and slide the floor around. And once the floor is in, the trim's down on it, it'll hold everything in place, so it won't be like sliding around on you. All right, I had to shut the door for this, so I moved the camera to the other side of the bathroom over where the toilet is. So we got this piece here. It's ready to go in. If you remember, we started with this piece and measured off to get our starter down there. So this piece should fit right in, and it does. It gives us that 1/4 inch that we want. So we still want to make sure we've got the 12 inches to be centered. So get that piece centered right there. And wiggle it in, snaps right in. And then the piece we've got left over, we got another one of those strips right here. And it's 8 3/4. So we're gonna leave the 1/4 inch space. We need 8 1/2. So measure out my 8 1/2. Make a line. And we'll go cut that piece. We've got one more piece left over. And what did I say that was? 19 3/8. So we'll pull a measurement here. 19 3/8. And that's going to be our last length. And we just have to cut it out for the door jamb. So we can just set it up like that. I'll make a mark there in about, we're going to go about 1/2 inch under here. So it'll leave about 1/4 inch off of the wall there. And then measure in here, 16 1/4. It's we're gonna go 16 inches. All right, so we got this piece ready to go. Let's see if we can slide it right in here. There we go. Now again, we've got this tongue on, so we're gonna pop this one off quick. Get this in here if we can. And slide that one on. And pop them both in at the same time, like that. And we will again use the little bar to get them into place. Last piece on this corner we're going to stick in. See if we can flap it in there. All right. There's the bar. All right, that's right in there. All right, so we got all the flooring in. Now the last thing we got to do is just give the floor a look over, make sure that all the seams are all tight. If they're not, we'll use the blue bar to just pull them in, adjust anything we got to adjust, and that'll be it. Then we'll be on to trim next. All right, so we gave the whole room a once over. We got a nice gap, just big enough. Everything's gonna get covered by trim. We're all good all the way down, all the way around. It's all good. And then we've got enough room here around our toilet. That'll all get covered. It's sticking underneath our door jambs, which is exactly what we wanted. And out here, looks really nice. So we'll just cover this. And it's nice and flush, so we'll just cover this with our threshold and that'll be good to go. So next is the trim. All right, so here's the finished floor. Get the threshold in, get the vent. All the trim's done. Plumbing, it's all caulked in. Looks good. Just give everything a once over. Looking good. Ready for paint. Well, thanks for checking out my video. Hopefully this helped somebody. If you liked what you saw or didn't like what you saw, please leave a comment below. And I hope to be coming out with more videos, so like and subscribe, and see you next time. All right, so I'm back, and we've got, today we're going to be blah, 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 blah. So we're going to lay out the flooring, blah, blah, blah. Can't do it. Starting over.